In this segment, we're going to go ahead and implement Manage Courses. So we're going to go through a lot of the same mechanics as we did with Manage Student in the previous video. We'll start off by adding a iSchedule repository, and we'll bring that in. It'll be a schedule repo. And then what we'll need to do is we'll need to pull all of the available courses from the repo. We'll say get courses, which will give us a collection of all courses. So now we have all of our courses, and we'll just send those up to the view model. So we'll say return view of courses. Now we need to create our view, so we'll add view, manage courses. And we're going to do a list again, and we're going to point it to the course model, and we'll hit add. That'll generate for us that list view and allow us to go in and manage or edit courses. So I'm going to go through real fast and implement edit course, and I'm also going to implement the create course. So I've gone ahead and implemented my edit course actions. So I'll go ahead and add my view. So again, this will be we'll use an edit template for the course class, and we'll click add. So that'll create our course, our edit course view, and we have all of this in place now. So we'll go ahead and hit save, and we should be able to build and run. And we'll need to log in with our admin user. And then we'll want to choose manage courses, and that'll give us a list of all of our courses. Go ahead and just edit the first course, and we need to actually still update that view. So if you remember from previous lecture video, we had to click on edit, and we had to point it to not edit but edit course. So we'll jump back to the code, and from our manage courses view, we need to change this from edit to edit course, and we need to pass in that route object value, and it will be item.id again, and we won't need details in this case. And delete, we'll go ahead and we'll just update this while we're in here, so we can delete our items if we need to. Okay, so we have that change. If we refresh this page, we can now hit edit. It'll bring in our course. We have a teacher ID, subject ID, course name, meeting time, and occupancy. So we have all of these details in here, so we'll just call this English 9A just as a quick example. We'll hit save. And now our course name is English 9A. So our edit feature is working. There's some improvements we can make, and we'll do those kind of at a later point. One of the things I did want to talk about, though, and we'll actually address this as we go through the create. So I'm going to go ahead and do a create new course. So right now create new just points to a create action, which does not exist. So we'll have to implement that action within our controller. So we'll do public action result create course, and this actually won't take in any parameters, and we'll just simply return the view. So we have nothing to really pass in at this point. We're simply going to go in and say, let's create a new course, so blank template. On the post back, however, we will be getting back a course, so we'll say public action result create course, and this will be a course, and there'll be course from form again. So we'll now have that course, and then we'll have to do the work of saving course. Now we're going to go ahead and say add a view for create course. We're going to use the create template this time and still point it to the course model, and we'll hit add, and that will kind of carve out or flesh out for us a form for creating a course. We'll go back to manage courses real fast, that view, and we'll update this action link at the top. This says create new, and we're going to say that the link will still say create new, but the action name will not be create, but create course. So that way from our page we'll actually see that update. So if we refresh this page, we should get back, oh, forgot to run. So F5, and we have a build error, not all paths. Oh, so this is not implemented, so we'll just throw a new not implemented exception, and we'll get to writing that in a moment. So F6, F5 again. Alright, so now we're back where we are. We can click create new, and that'll bring us up a new course form. Now the name is a text box. The ID for the teacher is this up down arrow type box where you can add numbers. What I actually want here instead of this is I want a drop down so I can pick the teacher. I don't necessarily need to know or want to know what the ID of the teacher is. I want to drop down and choose the teacher. Meeting times, it's just a text box field for date and time. Occupancy, I'm okay with this because we can actually say this is 10. We'll want to make is active true by default. And subject ID, again, we want that to be a drop down of subject. So how do we go about doing that work? So if we close out of our browser, we'll stop our code, and let's jump first into the create course form. So taking a look at what's going on here, we have these form groups, which are each one of our fields, and then we have a label, an edit for, and a label for. So the label is the label for the control, and then the edit for is trying to do its best guess at what kind of control needs to go into our form to render out things like teacher ID, name, meeting time, and so forth. Well, in the case of teacher ID, we actually don't want it to render a text box, we want a list box. So instead of using the default here, what I'm going to do is say HTML dot, and we're actually going to use a drop down list for, and then we'll say model dot teacher ID, and then there's a additional set of items that we can pass to this to help identify what we're going to use. So we have things like a select list, a select list with HTML attributes, a select list with option labels, select list again with HTML attributes, and you'll see that we have these different options in here. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a select list, but we're not going to do it here in our code. Instead, we're going to set this to null, and we're going to use our view bag that we had discussed in earlier weeks, and we're going to set the view bag. We're going to create a view bag property that is the same property as this helper method called the name, so teacher ID. So what we're going to do is we'll jump back to our home controller, and we're actually going to set it here in the get version of our create course. So we'll say view bag dot teacher ID equals, and it's going to be a new select list, and we're going to pass in a collection of items that can be used in our list. So the items that we need are subjects. So we'll say var subjects equals schedule repo, and we'll say get subjects, and then we'll pass in those subjects, and then we're also going to say what is the value selector or the value or the data value field in the text field. So the data field will be the ID of the subject, and then the text field will be the name of the subject. So that's what we do to actually kind of populate or pass data into what we're doing. I realized that I just got myself very distracted, and I did subjects, and then I said teacher down here for teacher ID. So that's okay, that's easy enough to fix. I'm going to say var teachers equals, I don't know if we actually have anything set up for teachers at this point. So what we may need to do is take a step back and update our schedule repository to get teacher data. So if we jump into here, we'll collapse our definitions. We actually don't have any means of getting teachers. So simple fix for that is IEnumerable teacher. We'll say get teachers. and we'll return from our context teachers. So now we have access to all those teachers. We'll update our interface, and we'll add that same method here. So we'll have IEnumerable teacher get teachers. Alright. So now we have a method to call from our repository, so we can say get teachers. And this, in this case, will be teachers. And our teachers have email address, first name, and last name properties. So what we may want to do is extend our teacher class to have another get property, which will be public string, and this is actually going to be a calculated field, and we'll call it full name, and it'll just be a get, and we'll return first name plus last name. So that'll generate a full name type of field. So in here, instead of saying name, we'll say full name, and then we'll do another view bag for subject ID, because we'll have to do the same thing for subjects. And we'll do a new select list of subjects, and this time it'll be ID and name. So what we're doing is we're storing into the view bag the select lists, the name value pairs that will be our drop-down lists. So we create one for teachers with the teacher ID, we create one with subjects, and then the subject ID. So that subject ID is the property off of our course that we're going to be mapping against. And we're kind of loading all that up in the view bag so that when we get to the view can then pull that data out and then generate the correct drop-downs. So from here we now have the drop-down list for teacher ID. We'll scroll down here a little bit further and find subject, and we'll do the same thing. So we'll say drop-down list for m dot subject ID and null. Do a quick F6 and then F5. Okay, so now we have our create course screen with our drop downs for subjects and teachers, name and occupancy and everything there. So what will happen now is when we get the post back will come back into our controller, and we'll be getting a course form object. So we'll be getting a course object that will have the data from the form. So what does that look like? So let's go ahead and jump in here, and I'm going to just do, this is something that I do personally when I'm trying to kind of debug through a new process. I'll just do object obj equals null. Now, what does that do? It declares an obj object. It doesn't really do anything. It sets it equal to null, but what it does provide me is the ability to put a breakpoint. So I can now put a breakpoint on this code. I can recompile. This still needs to throw a new not implemented exception so that the compiler understands, and then we'll go ahead and run this again. We'll go ahead and say create new course, and the course we'll create is Computer Science 1. We'll say Mr. Gates is teaching it. The meeting time will be 3/1/2014 at 10 a.m. We'll fit 20 people. It will be active, and we'll just call this a math class. So now if we click create, we should have hit our breakpoint. Oh, I'm sorry. Typo. My action is called course instead of calling it create course. So let's go ahead and correct that. Create course, F6, F5 to rerun, and let's try this one more time. We'll hit create, and that brings us into our action. Perfect. So if we click on course from form and we open that, we'll notice a few things in here that may be of interest. So we have the is active is true because we checked the box. The meeting time shows us 10 a.m. Course name is Computer Science 1, occupancy 20. The subject is null, the teacher is null, but our subject ID and teacher ID are both set based on the value that came from the dropdown. So we now have this data that we need to go ahead and create our form, or create our course. So to do that, we just have to take this course from form and push it into our repository and work out the mechanics of creating that course. So from within our schedule repository, we'll create a new method called public course create course, and this will take a course template, and then we're basically going to go through the mechanics of creating those courses. So using our context, we'll say courses.add, and we'll add the course template, and then we'll say context.save changes, and actually we need to capture the db course. It's returned from the add method. We'll call save changes, and then we'll return db course. So that will add the new course into the database and then save those changes, and then on the return side we'll be able to then see that new course that we added. So from our create course, we'll go ahead and implement the create course, and then we'll redirect to manage courses. So F6, F5. So we will load up, create new course, computer science, set that meeting time. We'll say 20 is active and it's a math course, and we'll click create.